Hello, chums. Robert Ross here with the latest Robert Ross's Comedy Heroes podcast. I'm ever joined by the delectable Miss Gemma Fanning. Hello, Gem.
Hello, Rob.
So, who are we doing today?
Peter Sellers.
Hooray! I always say this every week. I love Peter Sellers, but yeah, great, fantastic. So, absolute genius. Probably the finest comedy actor we've ever had in this country, I would think.
Well, I know him, of course, probably like most people, predominantly for the Pink Panther films.
Yes, of which he made several, even one after he died, which was quite a feat. More of which later. But yeah, he wasn't first choice for Inspector Clouseau. It was going to be Peter Ustinov, other Peter originally, and then Peter Sellers took it on. And it's funny watching the very first one, the Pink Panther. He's a secondary character. He's brilliant in it, but the star of it is really David Niven as the Diamond Thief. And of course, the Pink Panther was the jewel at the centre of the movie. But then they became called Pink Panther films, even when there wasn't the Pink Panther jewel in them.
So what came first? Was it the cartoons or the films?
Well, the cartoon they did the cartoons as part of the opening credits on the movies. So the cartoons span off, and you'll see when I was a kid on TV, it was Fritz Freleng particularly who was the mastermind animator behind the cartoons. So it was the Pink Panther show, which was a half-hour cartoon show, which was at least one Pink Panther and one Inspector Clouseau cartoon, sort of the crazy Peter Sellers in animation form. And those little films at the start of the films became just masterpieces. We watched one the other day, Pink Panther Strikes Again, and there's a whole fantastic sort of homage to old American movies. The Pink Panther as King Kong, and the Pink Panther as Fred Astaire, and it's just brilliant. So yeah, so they became intertwined really, and also the music of Henry Mancini was really important. That lovely sort of ba-bum ba-bum. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Exactly, which you just know you're in for a good time when that music strikes up.
I think I read somewhere years ago that I think it transferred really over to France. The French loved it.
Yeah,
and loved his interpretation of Clouseau.
Sure, but I mean, because he was a brilliant mimic and brilliant linguist. His performances as all sorts of nationalities are just spot on. So yeah, it's done with great affection. It's also obviously a tip of the hat to Jacques Tati and that sort of physical clowning that the Europeans, particularly the French, admire, because Benny Hill and Charlie Chaplin were huge in France. They admire the great mimes of comedy, and Sellers was a physical clown. I mean, he was a vocal dexterity. His dexterity of vocal comedy is just incredible, but as a pratfalling sort of slapstick comedy with some great stuntmen behind him as well. But he could do a great thing.
Of course, I love the wonderful Burt Kwok in it.
Burt Kwok, yeah, right. How you doing, Burt Kwok? Yeah, Burt's lovely. Yeah, brilliant. As Kato, yes. I'm my little yellow friend and all. But what a great team, and they were good mates. They got on really well, and I met Burt a lot of times after Peter's death, various sort of celebrations and blue plaque unveilings to the legend that was Peter Sellers. And Burt was fiercely proud of his legacy of those films. He really enjoyed doing those, and went on to be one of the integral parts of Last of the Summer Wine towards the end of that particular show. So he was always working, but he was great.
And of course, you had Graham Stark as the sort of straight character.
Graham Stark was, he's interesting. He came in as sort of like the sidekick. The second one was the first one that Graham Stark did. I think everybody thinks that Herbert Lom and Graham Stark are in all of them, and Burt Kwok. They all joined in the second film. So as I say, Sellers was quite a small part, a very beautifully played part, but he was a supporting performance in the Pink Panther. And they did a second one called A Shot in the Dark in 1964, which I think is my favourite Clouseau. I think that's just brilliant. George Sanders, the ever urbane and dignified George Sanders, just keeping a straight face against Sellers' complete madness. And Graham's in that as his sort of sidekick. And then they had a big gap. Sellers and Blake Edwards had a falling out after the third film they worked together, called The Party, which wasn't a Clouseau film. It was when Sellers played this hapless Indian actor in Hollywood, and it's a hilarious film called The Party. But they had a quite big falling out in that in the late 60s, so they didn't come back to do a Panther until 1974, The Return of the Pink Panther, and that's the ones I think that people remember as the sort of the real wacky, gloves are off insanity. So that's when Herbert Lom goes completely crackers, and that's when Graham Stark came back to play various little character roles, including Augustus Balls, the costumier and disguise expert that Clouseau always goes to get his wacky disguises. So it's there's a lovely sort of rep team to it. Blake Edwards was very good at that. He cast people that Peter Sellers got on with, so Graham Stark, Herbert Lom, David Lodge, Burt Kwok, all his gang really.
Could he then be quite difficult to get on with?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm told. I mean, I never met him. I'd love to have met him, but he had his moments. I think he became such a huge star. I think people forget how big a star he was in America. He was a massive star in the 1970s. Those Pink Panther films, although he had a few lean years in the late 60s, early 70s, those Panther films made him massive box office. They were huge, huge comedy successes, international comedy successes. So, I mean, he had all sorts of demons, Sellers, particularly after his first heart attack. He had a very serious heart attack in the mid-1960s. When he nearly died, and he just married Britt Eklund, and he was listening to a guy called Maurice Woodruff, who was a sort of not quite a charlatan, but he was sort of known for telling fortunes and things, and a sort of astrologer. And so Sellers put a lot of trust in him. And this heart attack came when he was making a film with Billy Wilder, who could also be quite a tricky character. The director, writer, producer, brilliant genius of cinema, Billy Wilder. So Sellers was making a film called Kiss Me Stupid with Kim Novak and Dean Martin, and he had a heart attack and didn't finish that film. He was replaced by another great actor called Ray Walston, who, when they finally finished it. But I think after that heart attack, I think he practically saw something. He saw purgatory or something, and he was never quite the same after that. So he had all sorts of worries.
Because you do a wonderful show about called Comedy and Madness, where you talk about...
Very kind, thank you, Jim. With my good pal,
about...
Robert J. Simpson, actually, and Tony Slattery. Absolutely, yes.
And you talk about, it's called a Comedy and Madness, and you talk about Sellers.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a nice hook to talk about these people who had sort of demons and problems, like Hancock, like Milligan, and Sellers certainly did. Yeah, but I think in a weird sort of way, it enhances his performances. You look at those films, and his choices weren't always the best. Some of the films, I've got a complete collection of Peter Sellers films here, and I watch one on a regular basis, and some of them aren't great films, but Sellers is always brilliant in them. And I just think he really was. He's much more than just a comic. He was a superb actor. But I think that was heightened by his worries, his insecurities, his superstitions. He had sort of worries about the colour purple and all this. He could be really problematic, and he did a wonderful sort of James Bond spoof called Casino Royale, not the Daniel Craig, but in the 1960s they did a spoof where everybody's playing James Bond. David Niven is Sir James Bond; he's the proper James Bond, but Sellers is in there and Woody Allen, and it's an amazing cast. Orson Welles is the sort of the pseudo Bond baddie, and it's loads of directors because they just couldn't handle it. Val Guest does a bit, and Peter Sellers' good mate Joe McGrath does a bit, and they were forever falling out. I mean, because he was purposely not trying to be funny. If you watch that film, he does a beautifully straight performance. I mean, there's nothing there hardly at all. But you can't take your eyes off him. But it's a very sort of bland, vague performance, and the studio wanted Sellers the comic, and he wouldn't play ball. So there's all sorts of issues going on with his career.
And of course, another big name that he worked with was, of course, Sophia Loren.
Sophia Loren. Oh, we're getting a bit controversial this one, aren't we? Yes, we'll call it In the Millionaires. Yes, Boom Diddy Boom and all that. Brilliant film. I love The Millionaires. Actually, it's and of course, I mean, but don't forget, Peter Sellers was a working class bloke from Portsmouth. You know, he came from a sort of musical background, but he when he first became famous, he was this wavy-haired, chubby bloke that did impersonations on radio. And fast forward not many years, 8-10 years, he was suddenly working with one of the most beautiful, famous women in the world, and he was completely smitten. So, and who wouldn't be, quite frankly?
It's interesting you say about people playing all the different parts, because there was a film which I managed to get for you where he plays all the different roles.
Oh gosh, yes. He plays a few parts in The Prisoner of Zenda, one of his last finished performances. Yeah, which is great. It's a famous novel and film. Ronald Colman did the 1930s version, Stuart Granger did the 1950s version, and Peter Sellers did a sort of brilliantly funny, actually, 1979 comedy version. Not too comedy, and Ian Lafreniere and Dick Clement wrote the script, so it's beautifully written. And Sellers is superb in it, and he with his then brand new wife Lynn Frederick in
How
it
many
as well.
wives did he have?
Of his own. Let me think. Three. I think it was three in the end, wasn't it? Brett Eklund, Lynn Frederick, and Anne was the first. Yeah, three.
Testing your knowledge.
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. I think it was three. But he was a boy. We won't go there, but he was a boy. But like I say, he if you look at some of those early 1960s films and mid 60s films like. What's New Pussycat, and there's lots of sort of The World of Henry Orient, which is an interesting film. He was trying to be a sort of comedy sex symbol. There's certain films that you can almost see him, trying to do the Cary Grant about it. There's A Girl in My Soup with Goldie Hawn as a good example, where he's just he's just a self-loving egomaniac, but brilliant performance. But you can see he's lost a lot of weight at this point, and he looks great.
I think it's probably where someone like Mike Myers got his inspiration for Austin Powers. I know he draws on a lot of those old films.
Absolutely, he does. Yeah, he takes on all sorts of a lot of Peter Wingard in there, and a lot of Sellers in there. Absolutely loves it. But Mike is obsessed with British comedy. He lived in England for a long time, so he knows his comedy. He knows his Sellers and his Cook and More and his Benny Hills and stuff, and his sitcoms and all that. So yes, but there absolutely is, yeah.
And did Sellers transferred well over, I think, to North America?
Oh God, I love him in America. Yes, I mean, talking about inspirations, because Peter's huge hero was Alec Guinness, and they worked together in two films at the sort of the start and end of Peter's film career. They made a brilliant Ealing comedy called The Lady Killers, which Alec Guinness was the lead, and Peter was drawing his what I like to call his fat Elvis period. He's his little chubby, sort of working class comic, and he's brilliant in it. And then they worked together on a film called 1976 called Murder by Death, which is sort of a spoof of detective films and detective fiction. So that was his big hero. But the film that he really sort of hit America with was a thing called The Mouse That Roared, in which he plays, I think, three characters in that, including one female character, which is very much sort of like a nod to Alec Guinness in Carnots and Coronets, where Alec Guinness plays six different characters of the same family. So that's why Sellers did it. If you see him playing more than one character, he's basically saying, I can do Alec Guinness nearly as well as Alec Guinness. He never got so big-headed that he thought he was as good as Alec Guinness, but he did that to say, look, I can do this too. I can be this clever. I can be this on-screen chameleon. So The Mouse That Roared was a huge success in America, and that was it.
And I think it's worth us mentioning the film Being There,
which is an amazing film, which is the last film he was sort of aware of being released. He made one more film after that, but yeah, Being There. It's often said that the fact he didn't get the Oscar for that was part of the reason why his heart finally just couldn't take the strain anymore.
I've not seen it, but is he more straight in that?
Totally straight, yeah. Sellers had a really good line when he's asked by a journalist about we always see you in so many different comedy guises. Who is the real Peter Sellers? And he would often say, there was no real Peter Sellers. I had it surgically removed. Which I think was a sort of like a general answer he would always give, and I think he's more complicated than that. I think his personality is much more complicated than just this bland blank canvas that he put characters on. But Being There is that blank canvas. It's an incredible performance. I'll show it to you. I mean, he basically got it from Stan Laurel. He bases it on Stan Laurel. There's lots of sort of childlike slapstick in it, and it's an amazing film.
I remember very clearly because they did the film The Life and Death of Peter Sellers, and that's how I remember I think the film ends with him walking off into the water.
The end of Being There is the end of with spoilers here, folks, but yes, it's almost like a religious ending to it, and it's Hal Ashby who directed it, and Sellers. His one sort of frustration with it was, if you actually watch the film, because it ends with this amazing, just him in his bowler hat and his umbrella. It's very Stan Laurel thinking about it, and the end of it, and very Chaplin-esque at the end of it too. And he walks onto water and fades. But then, as the credits go, Hal Ashby, in his wisdom, put a load of outtakes at the side, a la sort of Pink Panther stuff, and Sellers was convinced that's why the Academy chose. I think it was Dustin Hoffman over him that won the Best Actor that year for Kramer versus Kramer, rather than Sellers. But The Life and Death of Peter Sellers is an incredible film. I saw that at the cinema. I think it was made for TV in America, but they put it on the cinemas over here for a short time, based on a really good book by Roger Lewis. And Jeffrey Rush playing Peter Sellers and all other facets. He sort of plays his mother in scenes. He becomes Blake Edwards in certain scenes. So Jeffrey Rush is very much a Sellers performance. He plays lots of different characters. But in the film, mostly it's John Lithgow plays Blake Edwards, one of my all-time favourite actors, John Lithgow. So it's great. So yeah, that there's a lot of fact and fiction in that film, but it's a biopic. It's based on reality rather than a documentary. But it's an amazing introduction to Sellers. Well, yeah, I love it. I've not seen it for a while, but it's an incredible film, and lovely little touches like we've not talked about the Goon Show yet, but I mean Ray Ellington, who was an often heard jazz singer and also a bit part player in the Goon Show. His part in The Life and Death of Peter Sellers is played by Ray's own son, Lance Ellington, who, if you're a fan of Strictly Come Dancing, he's the lead singer for that. So it was beautifully made with a lot of affection.
So let's rewind, as you've just said. Let's talk about the start of his career.
Yeah, gosh. Well, as I say, he was born in a trunk, really. I mean, I think he was taken onto the stage by Dick Henderson, who was a lovely, rotund musical comedian who was the father of Dickie Henderson, who people might remember. So at the age, I think, 2 or 2.5, and Sellers was taken on to a round of He's a Jolly Good Fellow, and he promptly burst into tears and was taken off again. So he was rooted in variety comedy, British variety. Fast forward, I mean, he did bits and bobs, but war broke out, and he was a drummer, a jazz drummer, really. But he was taken up by Ralph Reeder, the Gang Show, like a lot of those comics were. Dick Henry was part of it too, and Peter Sellers found he had a natural gift for mimicry, so he would do people like George Formby and Churchill, and get laughs that way. So he became a good turn on the variety theatres after D-Mob. And radio, perfect for radio, doing impersonations, actually getting jobs, pretending to be other people to get jobs on radio.
Wow.
Yeah, he was that good. And he did things with Ted Ray, Raise a Laugh, which was a big success, and lots of other people, lots of work with the fledgling Goons, and he met the guys, Jimmy Grafton, who had a pub called the Grafton Arms. Peter Butterworth would be in there, and Graham Stark, and all these people that Sellers worked with, and the radio show was called Those Crazy People, the Goons, and those crazy people were Peter Sellers, Harry Seacombe, Spike Milligan, and at the time, the early days, Michael Bentine. So there were the four, and then Spike Milligan apparently thought Michael Bentine was so crazy, and Spike Milligan thinks you're crazy, then you are crazy. So Bentine went off and did his own thing. And the Goon Show was the three of them, and it was a success on radio for just under a decade.
So, what was your first Sellers film? Can you remember?
Oh, I can't remember the film, but the Goon Show. My dad was obsessed with the Goon Show, so my dad would write stuff in the Goon style, Tales from Men's Shirts and things, and it would spoof all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, I was weaned on the Goon Show and radio comedy in general, but the Goon Show. But as for a film, I don't remember. I think it was probably one of the British ones. I've got a soft spot for the British ones, so it's probably something like Heavens Above or something like that, which he did for the Boltons brothers, and he won a BAFTA award for I'm Alright Jack, playing this militant union boss, Fred Kite. It's a brilliant performance, and his daughter's played by my old pal Liz Fraser, who's lovely in that. So it's yeah. I mean, I say he's so good. I mean, as I say, you can watch any of his films at random, and they're always a good performance. He never gave anything less than top-notch performance.
So who would have written a book about him? What books are out there to read
There's
about
quite
his
a lot
life?
of books about Peter Sellers, actually. I mean, there's a load. I've yet to do one, but I will do one. If I'm spared long enough, I will. I'd love to do one. I'd love to do just like a sort of a guide to his work, really, because, you know, as I say, I always try and avoid too much scandal, but you can't help it with Peter Sellers. His life, although he was only 54 when he died, he packed a lot in, you know, and he was it was quite a roller coaster of a life. But yeah, I guess the definitive one is the Roger Lewis, the Life and Death of Peter Sellers. It's a massive old tome, and there's some amazing letters in there. So he gets quite a lot of good first-hand information from people. And the other one I would recommend, purely as a sort of like a celebratory friendship love letter to Sellers, is by Graham Stark, called Remembering Peter Sellers, which is a beautiful book. And also Graham Stark did an audio talking book of it too, which I have, which is a lovely listen. Because Graham Stark was not only one of his dearest friends, but also a brilliant photographer. So there's lots of lovely photographs that he would take of Peter. And Peter was a gadget nut. He would collect cameras and cars and record players and all. The latest gadget was always the thing he wanted. So yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So, what do you recommend then to watch? What's
right?
Our
so we do this. So yeah. So we're going to find a platform that we can put the links on. But if you follow me on my YouTube, my Comedy Historian YouTube channel, we'll put this information into a link tomorrow or whenever we put this out. But look out for that. But yeah, so free to enjoy. One of my all-time favourite comedy films, probably my favourite comedy film, actually, for a go-to quickie, as it were. It's only about 20 minutes. It's sort of like a pseudo-Goon film. It's called The Case of the Muckanees Battlehorn. And it's Peter Sellers and Spike Milligan and Dick Henry doing a spoof of those sort of Scotland Yard 1950s shorts. And it's absolutely hilarious. And in 1950s, early 50s, mid-50s, it was released. And fast forward 20 years, the Monty Python guys who owe a debt, and they acknowledge that debt to the Goons and Sellers and Milligan in particular, they picked up on the Case of the Muckanees Battlehorn and had that as their support feature for Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So it was back in the cinemas 20 odd years later. So that's my free to enjoy, the Case of the Muckanees Battlehorn. And to buy, there's several sort of box sets of Peter Sellers films, and I found one which I do have, and I'm looking for the cheapest one online here. But it's just called, we'll do a link again, it's called the Peter Sellers Collection. It's a glorious sort of pink cover, so it's good for the Pink Panther. And there's 6 films on there, and it's under 20 quid. I'll get Gemma to put the cheapest link on to buy it. But the selection of films is amazing. What's New Pussycat, which is, he's a psychiatrist opposite Peter O'Toole. He's superb in that. The Party, I mentioned that earlier, which is a hilarious film. The James Bond spoofs on there, Casino Royale. After the Fox, which is a lovely sort of international sort of crime caper with Richard Mashaw and his then wife Britt Eklund. The World of Henry Orant, I mentioned that. He's playing this eccentric pianist being pursued across New York City. And finally, you get the very first Pink Panther on there too. So you get 6 sort of 1960s Sellers classics for under 20 quid. So that's a nice starter kit for the uninitiated.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. I enjoyed that one. Thank you. All right, okay.
Whistle-stop tour of his life.
Absolutely. Until next time. Thanks, darling.
All right, then. Thank you very much. You've been Robert Ross.
And you've been Gemma Fanning.
Thank you.